Hello students, today we are going to learn the first poem, The Squirrel by Mildred Bowers Armstrong from Honeycomb textbook in English for class 7. So the name of the poem is The Squirrel. You can see the picture of a squirrel. In this poem, the poet Mildred Bowers Armstrong describes about a squirrel. And the poet also talks about the appearance and movements of a squirrel and how she was attracted by its playfulness and swift movements. Now you see in your textbook, page number 17, The Squirrel, written by Mildred Bowers Armstrong. In the warming up, it's written like this. You may have seen a squirrel sitting on the ground eating a nut. What did it look like? Here is a poet's description of just such a squirrel. So the poet saw a squirrel sitting and eating nuts. So here in this poem, the poet wants to describe the squirrel. It's a very simple poem and very short poem, but it's very interesting. So try to listen it carefully. Let me read out the poem. He wore a question mark for tail, an overcoat of grey. He sat up straight to eat a nut. He liked to tease and play, and if we ran around his tree, he went the other way. So up to this much only the poem. So he means the squirrel, okay? So he wore a question mark for tail. So in the first line, the poet says that the squirrel's tail is like a question mark because its tail, it rolls about like a question mark, or its tail raised upwards with a tip pointing downwards. And so by seeing it, it looks like a question mark. You can see the picture here. You might have also seen in reality. Okay, see the squirrel's tail, it's like a question mark, right? So the poet is talking about, first of all, as he is describing the squirrel, as the poet is describing about the squirrel, the poet talks firstly about the tail. Okay, so the poet says that the squirrel's tail is like a question mark because its tail raised upwards with a tip pointing downwards, or its tail roll about like a question mark. Is it clear? So first one is about the tail. Okay. Now let us see the second one, an overcoat of grey. So here the poet describes about the squirrel's body. So the squirrel has a grey coat. According to the poet, the squirrel is grayish in color, right? Gray in color. So the fur or the body of the squirrel, okay, it is so loose, okay, loose that the poet calls it an overcoat. You can see the picture of a squirrel. The squirrel looks, it's very furry. It's a gray in color, okay. It looks as if it's wearing a coat which is gray color, okay. So the poet says that the squirrel has an overcoat of gray, which means its body is gray in color, and so it is like as the squirrel is wearing an overcoat which is gray in color. Now let us see the third line. He sat up straight to eat a nut. He means the squirrel. So now the squirrel, here the poet talks about one of the squirrel's activity, that is how the squirrel eats a nut. You know what is a nut, right? Here also you can see the picture. The squirrel is eating nut. So the poet says that whenever this squirrel try to eat a nut, the squirrel sits up straight. You might have seen a squirrel running here and there, you might have seen, but again you might also have seen the squirrel's behavior. The squirrels, how they eat their nuts. They used to sit up straight. Okay, they always sit up straight in order to eat a nut. So in order to eat a nut, the squirrel used to sit straight. Okay, so you can see the picture how the squirrel is sitting straight and eating the nut. So the poet says that a squirrel always sits up straight to eat a nut. So first one, the poet talks about the tail. Second, about its body, that is about its overcoat. And now the third one, that is activity, how a squirrel. The poet talks about its gesture, the posture. Okay, the squirrel's body. Okay, how the squirrel eats the nuts. So the squirrel sits up straight to eat a nut. Now let us see the fourth line. He liked to tease and play. He liked to tease and play. So he is a squirrel. Okay, so from this line we can also understand that the squirrel is it talks about the action of the squirrel. The action of the squirrel that displays that this squirrel is naughty. Okay, it displays about its naughtiness and its beautiful nature. The squirrel is very naughty. So the squirrel likes to tease and also to play. Which means the poet says that the squirrel has a beautiful nature which has naughtiness in it. So he liked to tease and play. Now let us see the next line. And if we ran around his tree, he went the other way. So now the last two lines, and if we ran around his tree, he went the other way. So squirrel is a very funny little animal that likes to play with human beings. So if we means the boy and his friends. The boy and his friends, whenever they ran around the tree where the squirrel is sitting and eating the nut, the squirrel will try to tease them and also will try to play with them. And the squirrel will try to always go towards the other way. Which means the poet says that if they ran round his tree, then the squirrel would not be frightened. The squirrel will not try to run away from there, but the squirrel will always run around the tree, but the squirrel will run only from the opposite side. Because the squirrel wants to tease and also wants to play with the children. So this shows that the squirrel has got a nature of naughtiness. Is it clear? So this is how a squirrel does whenever they go around his tree. So as I said before, this poem is very simple. So the poet saw a squirrel sitting on a tree and eating nuts. Its tail was raised upwards with a tip pointing downwards, so the tail seemed to be making a question mark. And it also had a gray coat. It was so loose that the poet calls it an overcoat. And in order to eat a nut, the squirrel was sitting straight. Squirrel is a very funny little animal that likes to play with human beings. So if human beings means the poet and her friends. So if they ran round his tree, then the squirrel wouldn't be frightened, but it would also run around the tree, but the squirrel will run around from the opposite side. So this is how the squirrel try to play and also tease the poet and her friends. So the poet talks about the appearance and the movements of a squirrel, and how the poet was attracted by its playfulness and swift movements. Okay, so now let us see, working with the poem, there is 3 questions. Why does the poet say the squirrel wore a question mark for Dale? Draw a squirrel or find a picture of a squirrel sitting on the ground. How would you describe its tail? So here in the first question, there are 2 questions. First one and the second one, you have to do it by yourself. Okay, so what does the poet say the squirrel wore a question mark for Dale? Now we all know the answer. The poet says that the squirrel wore a question mark for tail because its tail is twisted, appearing like a question mark. Or we can say its tail roll about like a question mark. Or in other ways also we can answer because the tail was raised upwards with the tip pointing downwards. So this is the reason why the squirrel wore a question mark for a tail. So the second question you have to do by yourself. You draw a squirrel, okay? Or you find a picture of a squirrel sitting on the ground and you try to answer how would you describe its tail? How would you describe its tail? Now number 2, do we usually say that an animal wears a tail? What do we say? Think. Does an animal wear a coat? Consult a dictionary if you like and find out how wear is used in different ways. So you can see from the dictionary, find out what exactly wear is. So the poet here in this poem, the poet has used he wore a question mark for tail. He wore, okay? So do we usually say that animal wears a tail? No, okay, the answer is no. We don't usually say that an animal wears a tail. But what we usually say is that animal has a tail. We don't say animal wears a tail, but rather we say animal has a tail. Okay, now number 3, he liked to tease and play. Who is teasing whom? How? So the poem is very clear. I have already explained. So he liked to tease and play. Who is teasing whom? So the squirrel is teasing the poet and his friends. Okay, the poet and her friends. So how? When they ran around the tree on which the squirrel is sitting, it went the other way, teasing and playing with them. Okay, so this is the answer. And here in the poem is very short. Again, there are only 3 questions, so I'll be giving you even extra questions and answers also. Okay, so I had already done the explanation of the poem The Squirrel by Mildred Bowers Armstrong. I hope it is very clear. Thank you.